Imagine the worst nightmare you've ever had. Now, what if you woke up and realized that nightmare was your life? This is the chilling reality for people trapped in North Korea's modern-day gulags. North Korean defector Kwang-il is a living testament to the grim realities within these labor camps. Having survived over 2 years in such a facility, through his account and those of other survivors, we hope to shed some light on why you won't survive a day in the North Korean gulag. Welcome back to History on Fleek. Inspired by Stalin's gulag camps, North Korea's then leader Kim Il-sung established a similar system, known today as the North Korean gulags. The atrocities committed within these camps paralleled those of the Soviet gulags, but with added horrors unique to North Korea's oppressive regime. Among the sketches submitted by Kim Kwang-il to the UN inquiry into human rights abuses was this sketch that depicts prisoners eating rats and snakes out of hunger. In a grim system designed to crush their spirit, prisoners were given food portions that barely kept them alive. Every meal, they were served less than 80 grams of food, and sometimes even less as a form of punishment. And the food, if it can even be called that, was of such deplorable quality that even pigs would refuse it. Boiled, rotten cucumbers, and food unfit for animals were common fare. Refusing this repulsive meal was not an option. It only led to further punishment. In essence, these human beings were kept perpetually teetering on the brink of starvation. And hunger in these hellish conditions led to unimaginable desperation. Struggling to keep themselves alive, prisoners would consume anything remotely edible: plants, grass, bark, rats, snakes, and even the fodder of the labor camp's farm animals. According to testimonies, livestock raising was considered the occupation of choice, as the prisoners had the opportunity to steal animal food and even pick through animal droppings for undigested grains. A grim culture of distrust and hostility was bred among the starving prisoners. Driven to the edge by hunger, they would fight each other for scraps of food or the clothing of the deceased. The most horrifying result of this starvation was, without a doubt, instances of cannibalism. Prisoners lost in the throes of hunger were driven to eat the meat of dead prisoners before their bodies could be taken for disposal. Sketches and photographs bear testament to extreme punishments. Let's take a more detailed look at the sketches submitted by former political prisoner Kim Kwang-il to the UN inquiry into human rights abuses. In the first image, Kim illustrates a method of coercion used to force prisoners to confess to crimes or to falsely admit guilt. The prisoners are handcuffed in a stance known as the pigeon position interrogation. With their chests thrust forward, they endure merciless beatings. A cup is placed beneath their faces, and they are kept in this torturous position until the cup overflows with their tears and sweat. This painful mixture is then forced upon them to drink. This horrifying ordeal often results in many prisoners suffering from broken wrists and backbones. In the next sketch, Kim portrays the grueling stances they were compelled to maintain for protracted periods as a method of forcing them to confess to crimes they didn't commit. The torturous positions, referred to as the crane, airplane, and car interrogation positions, were as merciless as their names suggest. The prisoners were made to pose as they were riding a motorcycle or flying like an airplane for extended durations. The crane position was considered the most challenging due to the additional weight burden. What happened if they resisted? Well, initially, they were denied food and subjected to relentless beatings. If these cruel measures didn't induce compliance and the prisoner didn't utter the confession the authorities wished to extract, they were subjected to what was cynically referred to as correctional training, which translated into further rounds of intensified torture. Another sketch introduces a further method of punishment known as the pump interrogation. In this brutal technique, the prisoners were forced to perform endless sit-ups until they confessed to crimes they never committed. They were denied basic human rights, such as using the toilet and resting. If they dared to stop the relentless exercise, the guards would ruthlessly beat their legs. Consequently, numerous prisoners would be left physically maimed, some resulting in amputations. In the next sketch, Kim depicts a ruthless practice of solitary confinement, where a guard is seen brutally kicking a weak prisoner through the small door of a cell. The prison conditions were grossly overcrowded, with cells designed for 14 to 17 individuals, often crammed with up to 170 people. Inmates were forced to sleep on top of each other, and in extreme cases, even standing up. The appalling overcrowding combined with severe malnutrition led to catastrophic hygiene issues and the rampant spread of diseases. There were medics, but without any medicine, any illness within the prison became a death sentence. Contagious diseases would rapidly infiltrate the tightly packed cells, often leading to widespread fatalities. Adding to these inhuman conditions were cages designed to hold prisoners with no room to stand up or sit. Another sketch chillingly illustrates a scene where the place is infested with rodents, and a desperate prisoner is seen catching a mouse, not only to protect himself from bites, but also to eat it out of sheer hunger. Now, you might wonder about the fate of the deceased prisoners. A grim picture is painted in this sketch, showing the bodies being piled up in the morgue, left to be feasted on by rats that would gnaw parts of their flesh. Kim witnessed the passing of an astounding number of inmates during his time in detention. Over a mere 11-day period, he reported seeing more than 100 corpses. In his final sketch, Kim graphically illustrates the bodies being carted off to a mountain. Here they were unceremoniously tossed into a pit and burned like mere garbage. The residual remains, including bones, were repurposed as fertilizer for fields, a chilling reminder of the utter disregard for human life in these prisons. Apart from the sketches, some images also emerged as testimonies of the punishment that was inflicted in the North Korean gulags. One image shows a woman who lost her eyesight in her left eye after a punch during a brutal interrogation upon being repatriated to North Korea. In her second escape attempt, she suffered severe frostbite in her right foot without access to medical help. Prisoners recount vicious beatings by the guards that could result in eyes falling out or exposure of leg bones. One particularly chilling account was reported that following one execution, the prisoner witnesses were required to throw stones at the corpse until the skin started peeling off. Another prisoner was tied behind a car and dragged to death. Afterward, the witnesses were forced to place their hands on the blood-soaked body of the dead man. Now, think again. Would you survive in such a situation for a day? Probably not. Moving deeper into the dark abyss of North Korea's gulag, one finds the nightmarish reality of forced labor. Every prisoner, irrespective of their age, is conscripted into arduous and dangerous tasks, such as mining, timber cutting, farming, and sewing. The intensity of this labor is so extreme that every year, 20 to 25% of the labor force, political prisoners, are literally worked to death. This relentless toil is amplified by the near absence of basic necessities. Prisoners are clothed in nothing more than rags and given shoes of poor quality only once every 2 years. With shoes that barely last a year, the grueling work becomes a horrific ordeal. The freezing conditions, combined with inadequate protection, result in frostbite becoming commonplace and amputations an expected consequence. Those who manage to survive the deadly combination of hard labor and malnutrition often bear lasting physical deformities. Newcomers to these camps are often struck by the sight of fellow prisoners, their bodies wasted to alarming thinness, prematurely aged and often hunchbacked. Another sinister chapter of Korean gulags is the grim tale of medical experimentation. Eyewitness accounts reveal horrific experiments all conducted with a cold, scientific detachment that chills the blood. Lee Soon-ok, a survivor, recounts an incident where 50 healthy female prisoners were selected and fed poisoned cabbage leaves. Despite their pleas and the distressing symptoms of those who had eaten, they were forced to consume the deadly meal. All 50 women died within minutes, vomiting and suffering from severe bleeding. A refusal to eat would have spelled doom not just for them, but for their families too. Kwang-il, claiming to be a former head of security at Camp 22, narrates tales of glass gas chambers where suffocation gas experiments were conducted. In these chilling accounts, entire families were made the subjects of these cruel experiments. Sealed within the chambers, poison was injected as scientists observed the dying throes of the victims from above. There are further accounts of gruesome experiments. An Young-chul, a former prison guard, reports young doctors practicing surgeries on prisoners without anesthesia and orchestrated efforts to study physical resistance by starving prisoners to death. Once a month, a black van ominously known as the Crow arrives, selecting 40 to 50 prisoners for unknown destinations, creating a wave of dread among the remaining inmates. These accounts, as difficult as they may be to digest, are a reality within North Korea's labor camps. A particularly disturbing aspect of life in North Korea's labor camps is the complete isolation prisoners experience. Within the total control zones, prisoners, except for a privileged few, are cut off from the outside world. They are allowed neither correspondence nor contact with anyone beyond the camp's boundaries. Their only source of news is the bleak whispers of the newly arrived inmates, painting a haunting picture of a world forgotten. These bleak and nightmarish locations are often referred to as zones under special dictatorship, where each rule is ruthlessly imposed. Public executions are a commonplace sight. Those who dare to infringe on the rules face the fatal bullet. Those who harbor dreams of escape are met with the hangman's noose. These horrifying exhibitions of dominance occur in plain view of the gathered inmates, serving as a stark warning of the dire consequences of rebellion. It deepens the profound sense of isolation, making their confinement all the more oppressive and unbearable. This is History on Fleek, and we'll see you next time